Mike Goldstein is back to tell more stories about his time on the Flagship Apollo, handling all the money for L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology, and the Sea Organization. And you're going to hear some stories about Captain Bill Robertson. Stick around and stay tuned. Welcome, everybody, to the show, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and aloha, Janice Gilliam-Grady. What's going on here? Kind of festive looking here.
Look at this. I've got a shirt like you. I'm very proud of it.
Well, tell everybody what's been going on for the last several days. We've had quite a few people in town.
Yeah, well, I had a birthday, and then I had guests come into town, and some other guests found out that they were here, so they came a day earlier and just to hang out. So I've had a full house, and then Amy and Matt came into town, and we went down the strip and had dinner with them. And I mean, it's just been 3 days of partying with friends and having a great time. And this shirt was one of my birthday gifts. And so I can match you, Mark. I know. Proudly wear a Hawaiian.
Who gave you? Who's the gift?
This is not Hawaiian. This is from the Caribbean. This is from the Virgin Islands.
Who gave it to you?
I got it from April Hall. Yeah,
there you go.
We've interviewed her. We've had several interviews with her. Yeah. And we're going to have some more with her. We've just been busy having fun. So.
Yeah, and then we've got other friends that are in town to go see the Grateful Dead at the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
3 nights in a row. They're going 3 nights in a row with all their family. So it's
they've just left. They're waiting for the Uber right now while we start this.
I got it. Okay, great. Well, we've got a returning guest. We did an interview with Mike Goldstein the other day, and it was very popular. A lot of people enjoyed his stories and wanted more golds, more Mike Goldstein. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring him in, and we will get started. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, Mike. Aloha. How you doing?
I'm okay, but I wish you would have told me about the shirts. I would have worn my own Hawaiian type shirt. We could have been 3 of them. So I got the.
That's okay.
We can quickly stop it so you can go change.
I would do it if you really wanted me to.
No, that's okay.
I'm joking. I don't need to do that.
Janice, you're going fuzzy in and out again. I don't know why, but you are.
I got to just stay still. Okay. Well, maybe
anyway, good to see you, Mike.
In our third interview, we all wear Hawaiian shirts.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's no problem for me because that's what I usually wear on the show. I got over 50 of them, so I just sort of rotate them through.
Cool. Well, I'll get one. I have some nice classics. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Anyway, we left off at the last interview where you arrived on the Flagship Apollo and you told stories about meeting Mary Sue Hubbard for the first time and L. Ron Hubbard for the first time, and that's when we kind of ran out of time. So, did you want to start off? There's something you wanted to talk about that you talked about on the first episode?
Well, actually, it was after we did the show, memories came back.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something that Janice was asking me about, and she was right about. It was about who was staff captain when I first came to the ship, whether it was Sandra Johnson or Jill Carlstrom. And it was Sandra. She was right. I actually was FBO on the ship twice. I was at this time in 1972 when I got there, and then I went to Europe on a garrison mission. And when I came back, which 8 months later, I was put on the post again. So it was the second time that I was in the post that Jill was there, I believe, and Sandra had been removed at that time. Is that more like you remember?
So, yes, Sandra was removed and on the never to be an executive list again. And I love Sandra. She was a great lady, and she actually recently passed away after having been the accommodations register in Los Angeles for the Flag Land Base. Apparently she was there for 20, 30 years or something, regging people for staying at the Fort Harrison. And she was happy with her life. She got to go running every day. And I guess age just caught up with her because would have been in her late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And she recently passed away. And they at least on her celebration of life notice, because they were doing one for her, they did acknowledge that she had worked with Hubbard. So I thought that was kind of nice. They didn't say she was the staff captain running Scientology internationally from the ship, for Hubbard. But she was a good lady.
Yeah, and very dynamic. And
yes.
But what my memory of how I remembered that she was on the ship at that time was I was first, as the FBO, I was in that office on A deck on the port side that we were talking about.
Right.
And my memory that came back was she was outside his dining room with him, and he was bawling her out. I mean, he could get really, he could really yell at somebody. So
talking about Hubbard? Talking about Hubbard?
Yeah. He was outside there really, and Sandra was a tough lady, but you'd hear him yelling, and you hear this little voice, yes, sir, like this. And everybody up and down the corridor, once he started screaming, all the doors start closing. They all start shutting. I don't know what it was about me, about that kind of stuff. I had to hear it. So I would open the door and lean back to listen to the whole thing. I had this thing about that. I thought it was very interesting when he would do that because he never yelled at me. And so there was this, I just remember this one other time at the same place, right outside the dining room. Wasn't there like a green chair over on the port side, just right over in the corner?
There was 4 red chairs outside the dining room.
Red. All right. One of those red chairs, one over the corner. I was coming up from B deck to A deck, and he's out there doing it and Quentin is sitting in the chair, and he's standing over him, just screaming at him. And you'd see people that were coming up next to me. They just, as they go up the stairs, they just whoosh, they turn around and walk back down. People coming in from the 2 sides, port and starboard, whoosh, close their out. I don't know what it was. I was on my way to, I probably should have gone back down, but I just kept going. And I find myself, I'm standing right behind him while he's screaming at him. I don't know why. It was just, and I'm looking at, and all of a sudden I see Quentin and his eyes shift off of him and see me. And the minute he does that, LRH turns around and he gives me the dirtiest look, like, what the hell are you looking at, type of thing. I just put my hands up, sorry, and just walked away. I did a couple of times for some reason, and it was, I don't know why. Anyway, that was how I remembered that Sandra was the staff captain. Kind of so.
Yeah.
All right. So
there was many of those instances of Hubbard there yelling and screaming like a madman, and someone's coming in from the quarterdeck. They hear it, and the door, you don't even see who it is. The door just closes again, and no one comes in.
Yeah, or they're walking, it's just like a turned around and gone, It's like,
it'd be the same. It was the same with Miscavige when he started. Nobody wanted to be around when he started yelling. He just turned around and went the other way because sure enough, he would turn and look at you and go after you. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
I met Miscavige. I've not met him. I talked to him before he was ever in. I never knew because he wasn't on the ship. He was some kid somewhere. And before all that stuff, and he came to Denver before he had taken over on a CMO mission. And I didn't even remember. I remembered the name, and then when he became, took his power, that sort of thing, I said, I know, I've heard of that guy's name, and I used to keep notes, and before computer, so that I know people I talked to, and I went through all my notes, and I found. And then I remembered him calling me. But I'll have to tell you about that later.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, when we get back. Yeah, funny guy, little guy. Anyway, so we're on the ship and the FBO thing, right? Okay, just taking over.
Yeah, well, you were telling us about handling the money. I mean, you had over $1 million in cash in the safe there on the Apollo, and having to keep different denomination or different currencies, right? So that you had dollars, francs, and whatever, right?
Well, I don't know where some of these currencies came from. They were there when I took it over, and we never spent them. They just, anything anything that wasn't the ports we were in, or any currencies that weren't that or dollars or Swiss francs, I never used them, and I don't know where they came from. They just stayed in there, and it just added them into the amount. But pretty much the accounts on shore, once I'd set them up, were then in that currency, dollars and Swiss francs, and then, like you said, it was in the safe in the cash, which was about $1 million, and then what was in the accounts in when I was first there, it was Switzerland. It wasn't Luxembourg until I got back and opened those. That's because they didn't have the Luxembourg accounts. They didn't have the Religious Research Foundation yet. That was later to come.
You know, I talked to my brother, and he said money had been picked up from Switzerland to close that and brought to the ship. And then he went with you and Fred Hare to Luxembourg to take the money to open that account.
Okay. He said the money came from Switzerland.
Originally, it was Switzerland.
No, maybe we went
it
a
was
different
on the ship.
On the ship.
The money
Now,
was
I'm
on the
wondering.
ship and you guys left with
Yeah,
it.
when I did it, we didn't close any account. We didn't close any. I took the cash from the cash I had on the safe to open up the accounts in Luxembourg. That's where that money came from. We didn't nothing else. But he wouldn't have actually known that. But I had the money. I had.
Well, I know Kimmer had done things earlier, and Kimmer had gone to Switzerland, gotten and brought it to the ship. There was LRH had over $2 million.
Janice, you're breaking up. Janice, you're breking up.
That was at another time when I was there, Janice. It was, and when I went with you with your brother, that was just it was just to open up those accounts in Luxembourg. That's what it was. Yeah.
Right.
And when I first got there, at the first time I was on the ship, it was just Switzerland, pretty much. That was pretty much all. And it wasn't, the money we had in reserves wasn't that much compared to what they had later. Once they, later on in the buildings and started doing the heavy. There wasn't that much. I mean, try to remember.
So did you know, like, you were in charge of the Sea Org reserves, as we called it, the SOR?
There were on those accounts in Switzerland and all that stuff. There was 4 signatories: LRH, Mary Sue, Fran, Broker, and me. And apparently, anybody could take the money out without the other signatories, because I was transferring money without any other signature, I think, at that time. But that was in Switzerland. And everything else that we operated on was cash, except we would get food from some company called Rotterdam.
That was from Rotterdam in Holland. They would, at that time, we started getting fresh food shipped down, big container full of food, so we didn't have to eat the local food.
Right. And that was the only place we weren't, I paid checks.
Right.
I didn't pay them cash, but everything else was cash, all the ports and that sort of thing.
Mike, let me ask you a question. So the money, the main accounts were in Switzerland at the time, and that was like the Sea Org reserves. So how would the money come from? Would they come from the organizations and be transferred into the Swiss account, or how did they control the money?
The money that was in the Swiss account?
Well, I mean, didn't money come from all the Scientology organizations to the Sea Org reserves through the flag banking office, or no?
Yeah. What was I don't remember exactly, but they had to be deposited in there. I don't remember that, to be honest with you. I remember getting, and I needed money. Sometimes I would wire transfer it from Switzerland. That's right, because when I opened up, the only time I did that was when opening up those dollar and those counts in the local ports. That I didn't take money from my safe to open up those. I transferred money from Switzerland to do that, and then just had the same cash. Okay, I don't know. That's what I remember.
That's okay.
Right. Yeah, because on the ship, we operated with cash. We paid locally with cash, not
paid
checks.
Everybody. Yeah. No. The only checks I ever wrote were to Rotterdam. That's the only ones I remember ever writing. Everything else, and like Treasury, and the Treasury and the household, they all had their own little cash boxes. That was their bank account. It was just like in an org, but it was cash. They the main account, they had the pay, but they were just cash boxes. And
Yeah.
so they would come to me for FP, and I would give them cash, and they'd put their cash in there and spend it that way. That's how.
Right.
And
how would you get more cash when you
I
spent
would
out
go
money?
to the local bank.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I did this. So I never brought anybody with me. I just did it. And I would go to like a local bank, and they take me into the safe room, whatever it was. And I'd get like 50 grand in say escudos. And I remember they were packaged like little squares. The money, it's wrapped. I just tell everybody it was like little squares. And I'd fill a briefcase with this stuff, 50 grand. And then I would just come back to the ship, and I'd stop for coffee. And I didn't, because I figured nobody knows what I got in there. So why,
Right.
I only had somebody come with me when I was carrying $250,000 to Switzerland or to Luxembourg. Yeah. But no, that's how I did it. So I'd come back and I put it in my safe so I'd have enough to disperse it. That was the main thing that you had to do as the FBO, was make sure that, that they had the money, that we had enough of that currency to operate in that port. And so I had to know what the schedules were, where the ship was going, how long we would be there, all of that, because that was very important.
Right. Well, and we didn't leave port until all bills were paid. Yeah. So there's times we were delayed on leaving because we're waiting for someone to come in and get paid. Oh. So when we left port, we owed nobody anything, and it was all done in cash. It's me of a story in 1968. My dad was, I believe, probably the first flag banking officer. Hubbard had just come aboard the ship, and he assigned my dad as a flag banking officer because he'd known my dad from St. Helens that he was a chartered accountant. And so he was the FBO, and he had an office in one location, and Mary Sue was his boss, and she was in another location, and it was decided to switch their offices. So, of course, with us dealing in cash to pay everything, my dad had a briefcase full of cash in his office. And he wasn't there when they decided to do the switch of offices. And whoever was helping Mary Sue found the briefcase in his office and opened it up and saw all the cash. So next thing you know, my dad is being accused of trying to steal all this money because it's in his briefcase. And he'd put it in the briefcase to do the move out of the safe because you can't take the safe.
Right.
Anyway, he ends up removed from post, assigned to the decks. He ends up, because he started trying to challenge the whole thing, he ends up in the chain locker for like a week with bread and water as his only food. And that's when he was like, this is not for me. And he was assigned treason and had to work up all the conditions. My sister and I had to write disconnection letters from him because he was now a suppressive person. And I just turned 12 years old, and Terry was 13. And instead of the disconnection letters being given to him, and thankful they weren't, but they were mailed to my brother on the Avon River, who's then like, why are my sisters disconnecting from me? And it was just nuts. And then my dad ends up leaving. Huh?
This is the Royal Scotsman that you're on?
This is on the Royal Scotsman in the middle of 1968.
And did your brother think that you were disconnecting from him because his name is Peter Gillum Jr.?
Yes. Yes. They had the same name, and we disconnected from Peter Gillum. You know? And it's like,
who ordered all that?
What?
Who ordered all this? Who ordered all this, that your dad go through all this?
Baron Perez was the ethics officer at the time. Baron used to walk around the ship with a mace or with a baton, and with his hat, and very serious, and he had funny eyes where you didn't know if he was looking at you or not. You didn't know who he was looking at.
This is the guy who got caught smoking weed on the Apollo.
Smoking
right?
weed. Yeah, because later on I was with Hubbard and we're looking over the edge, and a lifeboat comes in and with the Liberty crowd, and they had to climb up a rope ladder, and Baron and his girlfriend were, and Hubbard's like, he's on drugs. And that's when he had his cabin inspected and found he had marijuana on board. So he got offloaded.
That was the end of
yeah,
Barron.
definitely no drugs on board.
Oh my, well, you know what? You know who got beached while I was on board was
Who?
Otto Bruce. I'd just come to this ship, and I see this guy. I didn't know who he was. I mean, and he was. This is before he got busted, and he would walk around in these silk bathrobes, smoking a cigarette out of a cigarette holder like he owned. I was like, who is this guy? And I wasn't there, but for more than like a couple of weeks before, you know, they find out he's been sleeping with his PCs and stuff or something.
Oh yeah, he definitely.
He's just walking around like Hugh Hefner. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's
Hugh
what he.
Hefner,
And the next thing, and I remember the guy that threw him off, a good friend of mine from South Africa, Blessing.
Fred Blessing.
Fred Blessing. He's the guy who got to take him and beach him, and he really enjoyed that.
Well, not only was he sleeping with these PCs, he was also having threesomes.
God, what us!
And here he was. Here he was, class 12 auditor and CS. He was like top guy.
He was the top guy on. Yeah, he was his right-hand technical person at that time.
Yeah.
And of course, we've told the story before. He is also the one who said, "Oh, I'm going to go and, you know, do an error summary on your folder, sir," and finds rock slams in them. And I don't have rock slams, right? And then,
exactly.
And then
We've told that story before.
Yeah, we've done that story before.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that one. I'll have to listen to it. Oh my God! But that was I was just there, and I go, "Who's this guy?" 2 weeks, and he's off the ship. Yeah. So that was an interesting period. When I was at that time as FBO, like I mentioned to you before, it was. I'm still really running into all the heavy stuff of trying to put the finances in, but as I got support from LRH and Mary Sue, it made it a lot easier. You know, then I could just do what I wanted to do, and nobody got in my way. And it didn't take that long. We had all the accounts, everything was set up really nice, everything was smooth, you know, and working well. And didn't take too many months to do that, to get everything set up. And like there were always those emergencies, like what you were talking about before. It's like we had to pay all the bills. We paid all the bills before we left the port, that sort of thing. But there were times where if you didn't pay bills, you couldn't get out of the ports. Not that we just did, but they wouldn't they wouldn't let you out. And trying to put the financial control in, most of it was pretty easy past a certain point, except there are certain things you have to give them the money. There's no choice. You know, you have to do it. You know, and so that made it really difficult. So the only thing I could think of doing at that time to fix that was to disguise money, so that I could have money in a reserve that nobody knew about, that I could use in emergencies. I mean, this is something that I could have been, you know, like your dad. Because what I would do is I would actually disguise it in the FP so everybody thought it was spent. And of course, everything's in cash. So at the end of the week, I'd take that cash and I'd put it in an envelope in the back of my safe. And as far as everybody knew, that money was spent on something. Right. It was disguised. So I built up a really nice little cache of it. This is, you could probably say it was, anyway, I can't remember the word for it. Embezzlement. So I was embezzling.
Well, yeah, it's called a skim in Vegas. You were skimming off the top,
or
putting it aside for a rainy day.
And I just would I'd call it something within the FP, and everybody go, oh, and nobody knew, Frank, none of them. And I had this money in there, and I figured I don't want to tell anybody because I just wanted to have it in case something happens. And I remember the first time we were trying to get out of some port, and there were some of the lifeboats, and we couldn't get out. And until we had to fix all the lifeboats or get new life or something. And they're going crazy because it was a lot of money. And what are we going to do? I just go to the back of my safe. There you go. Yeah. It was very hard after that to do it. Once I told Franny how we did it, the whole thing, that I couldn't really do it anymore because everybody, you know, they knew. But for that lifeboats thing, it worked really well. You know, so it was fun. I really kind of enjoyed that post for a while. And then it just got to a point where it was getting boring for me. You know, it was just, you know, then it's just like the same thing over and over. And also it was like, working with the two of them, LRH and Mary Sue, I always felt like at that time, like I was in a bubble. I mean, it was, I don't know how to explain it. It was like too comfortable, you know? I was really, I didn't feel like I was really learning anything or getting anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I just felt like, and like I said, I didn't do watch. I had my own private cabin. I did what I wanted, that kind of stuff. That was fun at first, but then just this post, finally, I was just, and then what happened was kind of strange, because then Franny was trying to find somebody, try to figure out how can we get FBOs in Europe, right? Because we had an FBO there, the FBO EU, and she basically handled the finances at AOS HDK and pubs and USLO, and that was pretty much it. I think there weren't any other FBOs except pubs. That was it. And That's pretty much what she did. She just covered the FBO functions. As far as actually expanding the network or anything, they weren't doing that. Plus, the GO was pretty much riding roughshod. GO finance, And
Herbie Parkhouse.
Well, this was Herbie was a worldwide, but I think he had a FBO. I mean, AG finance by the name of. It was a woman, or Hannah and Nana. She was Danish. Anyway, so Freddie's going nuts trying to figure out how can we do this? How can we expand it like we did in the U.S. and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking this is my chance to get off the ship. I just wanted to go out and see what was going on out there. Like I said, I'm just stuck in doing this same thing, and I wanted to know more about orgs and stuff and how you run them. And LRH, he would ask me questions that somehow I knew, but then I didn't really, and I wanted to know this. So I go to Franny and I say, I want to do it. I want to do this. I want to go to Europe and do this. And her, says, he'll never let you go. He won't. She knew LRH didn't want me off the ship. He wanted me there, and she said he will never let me go. So I said, yeah, but how can we do this? So she wanted me to go to Europe. So we really didn't tell him. She didn't tell him, not me, but she didn't really. And there was a guy on the ship. Do you remember a guy? He came there when I did, a new recruit. His name was Larry Steely. You remember the name? He probably did. He was a little
Larry Steely.
Really, I bet you wouldn't remember, because he was one of these guys who's just over. But he was in the finance office a little bit, and he was a real nice guy. And I'm sorry, what I remembered all of a sudden about him was when he was in Morocco. Remember how you mentioned, nobody would eat, and people were afraid to eat that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, when I first came to the ship and we had the First Liberty, that's where everybody was going to the French Quarter. Nobody wanted to eat in the Moroccan. So what was it called? The Kasbah?
The Kasbah.
Right. Nobody wanted to eat there. So this Larry had lived in Morocco, in Casablanca, of those areas, when he was a hippie, when he was a druggie, and he lived there. And he says, "What are you talking about? You're going to spend your whole $10 in there. You'll spend at least half your money in there. It's ridiculous. Let's go into the Kasbah. I'll show you where we can eat." And he said, "Well, you're not going to get sick. Just go." And I'd been in Central America. I'd lived in the jungle. I wasn't afraid of that stuff anyway. So we went in there. He told me what not to eat, but we went to a restaurant, had the most incredible meal. Oh my God, course after course. And it was a family-owned restaurant, and they'd send their kid out to get Cokes for us. They didn't have Cokes there. And the whole meal cost me, each of us, 2 dirham.
Wow.
It's like $1 or something.
Yeah.
And everybody else got like, $6, $7 of their $10 for a little junk. And I go down there with him. We'd have these great meals for $1. Anyway, that's Larry's. So when I left the ship, that's who I turned the FBO post over to, and he really wasn't up to doing it, but Franny was going, I can help him. I'll do it. Don't worry, just go to Europe. So I remember I had to go so quickly that we used to have our laundry in buckets, remember, with seawater you'd wash?
Yeah, we had to wash them in buckets. In
seawater, you don't want to use, yeah. So my laundry, I didn't have that many clothes, and I had one little suitcase, and I have to go, so I had to throw them in the suitcase wet. I was down in B deck. So I'm running up because I had to get a cab to go to the airport. And as I come up to the top of the stairs, LRH and Mary Sue are coming out of the dining room, and he grabbed me. He says, "Where are you going?" You know, and he knew at that point. And I said, "I'm going. I'm going. I got to." He said, "I got to go." I just said, "I got to go do this." And then he grabbed my hand. "Well, you got to come back soon." The whole thing. Okay. And I just turned around and left. While they were standing there, I just turned around, got on, and I got off the ship. And I know he was not mad at me, but Franny.
Well, let me ask you, when you have interactions, like, did you have interactions with like that on a routine basis? Like, was he always friendly to you like that?
Yeah, unless he was pissed at me.
Yeah.
And then, and if he was mad or we were having, then I would get the look, either the pissed look, this angry look like the one or I would get there was another look he gave me, which was like the real disappointment. So it's either anger or the disappointment thing. That's I never yelled at him.
Yeah. See, Mark, you got to realize LRH's office was on the prom deck, and you come straight down those stairs, and he would turn to go down the portside corridor to go to his cabin. But the very first set of rooms where Gold's was right there. It was like the first little corridor off the passageway.
So you'd see him all the time.
Coming out of his office and Hubbard's coming down the stairs, he's going to run right into him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's right. And I was always upstairs. I'd run him out, run into him outside his research room too, because I was always going up and anyway. But for me, it was a relief to get off the ship. It was just like I said, I felt like, like she would treat, I was like, she was like a mother, and he was like, I don't know, it was just a strange relation. And I just felt like I wanted to go. So that's when I got off there and I went to Europe. And
where'd you go in Europe?
I was at ULO, at the CLO in Copenhagen.
Oh, Copenhagen.
Yeah. Koksvej Odetuva. That was Koksvej 28. That was the address. I still remember. Yeah, I didn't speak Danish, but I could sound Danish. I could pretend that I was. So I'd go into cabs and I knew addresses. And for some reason, when I would go there, I could just kind of go, and they, and I knew a word like Danesta, like next. And I do this with Rebecca, who had been there for like, I don't know, year and a half. She says, "You speak Danish already?" And I go, "Yeah, sure."
Do we have a photograph of you in Europe? The one that I have here, is that from that time period?
That was after Rebecca and I got married in Copenhagen, right after.
But that's around that time period, right?
That's in my office in ULO, in the finance office, and this is just right after we got married.
Now, just so people know, Rebecca, her name is Rebecca Jessup. She is the younger sister of Nate Jessup, who is actually still a Scientologist in good standing, and his younger brother, Amos Jessup, who passed away several years ago. We'd done a celebration of life for him maybe 5 years ago or something. But, and Rebecca, she recently passed away. I think it was last year, right, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both of them have cancer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then How long were you married together? How long were you married?
16 years, I think.
Oh, okay.
Was it? Yeah. I remember that. We got married in 72. We got divorced in about 87. That's right.
And she's the mother of your children, right?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Our kids are
lovely lady.
Yeah. She was terrific. She was wonderful.
Yeah.
And our oldest daughter is going to be 50 in December.
Wow.
Can't believe it. Anyway.
Wow, 50.
Amazing, right?
My baby just turned 45. So there you go.
And you don't look a day over 40. You don't look a day over 40.
Oh, that's very nice. I'm 45 too.
Well, I turned
75.
According to the candles my sister had on my cake, I turned 35 just a few days ago.
Congratulations. That's great. You don't look a day over 33.
Right, exactly.
Anyway,
Okay,
Yeah.
you go to Europe.
so in Europe, and it was interesting. You know, I first had to get turned over on all of the finance because it's totally, and it's all in different, you know, in a different currency, and then it's like, how do you get the money from the orgs? So I had to kind of get that whole hat turnover from this woman. I had to do it really pretty quick, and so because then the whole idea is, how am I going to get FBOs in these orgs? You know, there's no, you gotta understand, my mission. I was on another Garrison mission, but there's no real thing on how you do it. You just do it.
Right.
You know, that was the thing, and which to me was easier anyway. I never really liked these long programs, you know, all the target, because things changed all the time anyway. You know, I'm doing some and then so I just as soon say, you know, this is what I want to do, and then I go, and the targets would change anyway. I do one thing, and then all of a sudden so I'd have to adjust it anyway. So
Right.
I didn't mind, you know, just do whatever was necessary at the time to get where we wanted to go. And so the first part was just taking over and learning the banking system. How do I get money out of the country? How do I get it from the orgs? That sort of thing. Because she really wasn't doing much of that, right? Whoever it was, I can't remember her name, but she wasn't this woman. But the hardest thing there was the banks in Denmark. Oh, I don't know what it was, but I go in there, try to get something done, try to get something set, and it was always the same thing. That's impossible. It's impossible. What do you mean it's impossible? It's impossible. It was anything they didn't want to do was impossible, that kind of thing. And it was really driving me nuts. And this woman, she couldn't really, when I was learning, taking the post office, she couldn't help me. And there was this guy in Treasury by the name of Ulla Gerstrom. He eventually got taken into the GO, of course. But before that, he was the Treasury guy, the purser or whatever, Treasury guy at USLO. And he heard me talking to somebody about it, and he said, I can help you with that. I go, really? Oh, yeah. He says, what do you need done in the bank so I can help you? And I got to take this guy in, but this guy looks like, you know, your real, what's the word? A Sea Org member like you'd pick. He had the white shirt and the black pants that looked like they were never been ironed, right? And his hair was kind of greasy, like he hadn't taken a shower, and stubble. And he didn't look, he looked, you know what I'm talking about, like a harassed Sea Org member.
Yeah, the Sven Peterson look, as I used to say.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you. A lot of the guys I'd noticed, to hem their pants, they'd use a stapler.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's a good one. That's better than putting high karate on your socks. I don't know who would do that. An idiot would do that. But anyway, so I said, okay, can you help me do this? Oh, yes. He's totally confident. You know, so I said, good. So I take him into the bank, and he's dressed this way too. And you know, these guys are in suits and stuff. And I'm like, oh. So he goes up, he's talking to them in Danish, and these guys start like, yes, sir. Anything this guy says, they're just like treating him like it's, you know, like he's the president of the bank. Never saw anything like it. And he had everything done. He said, anything you need, you know, and he says, here, what else do you need? You know, and he would do, and he started getting all this stuff set up for me. And this is also a true story. Anyways, so later on, how do you do this? He says, I will show you. So he takes me into his cabin or whatever they call, you know, his room. And it's really small. You know, it's a little tiny room where here's the bed. And then, I mean, you can put your foot up on the other wall. That's how small it was. And all he had there was like a record player and music. And all of it was like Danish opera and stuff, you know, really strange stuff. And that's all he did. He was listening to this Danish opera. And he pulls out this book. And it's about the Rothschilds, right? And he's got pictures in there of the Rothschild people, of the you know, they're sketched, you know, they're pen sketched. They're not real photographs, but they're pictures. And he shows me this guy, and it's him. It's exactly. It's a dupe. I mean, it looks like the same guy exactly. And he says, that was me. He says, what? He says, and he tells me this whole story about, I don't remember, about how he, you know, took the money and got this whole thing. He was like totally, And he says, that's why they treat me that way. And I can do anything I want with banks. I didn't question. I just said, good. When can you come back if I need it? And that's the way I kind of got into the banks, was from that guy. And
is that when did you meet Rebecca when you were there in Copenhagen?
Yes. Well, I had, later. She was like the lead auditor at AOS HDK. She bilingual. She audited in English and French. Okay. And before that, she was the qualsec there, I think, for a while. But when I got there, she was auditing lots. They kept her in the chair a long, long time. So that's what she was doing when I got there. And what was it? Okay. But the thing with the FBO post, before, and this is, I met her a little bit later, not right away, because I got there in August, and I was so busy because I was trying to figure out, how do I get the FBOs in the orgs? How do I do this sort of thing? And plus it was hard with the Guardian's office, because with the finance, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but you had the FBOs and they also had the AG finance, the assistant guardian for finance, in every org too. They had,
right.
And they were always fighting. Always. There was always a thing going on between the FBOs and the AGs. Ellerite set it up that way. He set it up as a system like a check and balance, and so you just fall into that thing, and you'd always be fighting with those guys, So, and it was always that the AG finance, they always had a better shot at it. When it comes down to who wins, they'll always win, right? And that's the way.
And just so people know, the AG finance is in the Guardian's office, and Mary Sue Hubbard is the controller over that, is in charge. And then, of course, Hubbard is in the C organization, and technically he'd be over the flag banking office as well. But Mary Sue was the one, because she's the guardian, and she's when she's a controller, but she basically is the one that's going to win out on any of those things, because they were trying to protect the money and protect Hubbard and all that.
Well, see, I thought, because of my wonderful relationship with Mary Sue and all this, that I could just do my mission orders and do this, and I felt totally.
Janice had a really good relationship with Mary Sue.
Oh, I don't think so.
I had some good relationships with her, and I had one really bad one.
I'm joking. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, she was in my face, calling me the biggest liar under God's green earth.
And she had no love lost for the messengers either.
No.
But she protected you guys from somebody trying to screw around with you.
Oh yeah, she did.
She
definitely did.
They're beached. They were beached. That was it. Yeah. I saw a guy get that happen. That's it. There's no question. They're on the beat. Well, how did I get here? Never come back.
You messed with the messengers. Yeah, you were beached.
You would have your head, man. That was
when
Mary Sue.
Pulled a knife. He pulled a knife on somebody, right, Janice?
Mary Sue did. Yeah. Yep. She pulled a knife on him and ordered him off the ship, and he was beat. He had to find his way back to America. Yeah.
So whether he even had his passport or not, I don't even know. Those guys, but anyway,
no, he didn't.
She didn't care. She was man. She was tough.
All he had was a return ticket to the U.S. He had no cash. That's all he had. But it wasn't booked for a flight or anything, and he had to get from Agadir to Casablanca with no money.
He had to go to an American consul. That's the only thing he had. He had to go to a consulate or something if he was from the U.S. or something. But yeah. Well,
what saved him was when he got to Casablanca, he bumped into his brother.
Oh.
His parents were over in Africa, and he bumped into his brother at Casablanca. So the brother helped him out, and then he got down to his parents.
Lucky guy. So when I got there, I felt that, I was much entitled, I could do my mission orders. I wasn't going to have to mess with the GO, and which we'd done in the U.S. But I figured at this point, the way Mary Sue treated me and how the relationship I had with her and all this, I'm not going to worry about it. So I wanted to get the AG there, AGF, this woman I was talking about. She was the Europe assistant guardian, and I basically just blew her away. I just basically blew her off, told her we're going to do this. I mean, I didn't nothing. And I just figure I'm going to do my mission, or you don't tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. I don't remember, but I just put her in her place. And the next thing I know, I get a telex from Franny going, apologize to the AG immediately. And,
dear.
Apologize to her right away. And you don't do anything, this whole thing. This is from Franny. And I'm going, what? And it totally ties my hands. And I realize right now, I got to figure out how to do things totally different. And I didn't find out till I got back to the ship, and I asked her about that. Why did you do? She says, because Mary Sue was standing behind me, making me do it.
Yeah.
Mary Sue did that. She goes, she may be friendly with you, but when it comes to the Guardian's office and that, it doesn't matter. Especially you're in the field, it won't matter because she's going to find with them every time. So,
that's right.
Yeah, it didn't make any difference. And I didn't realize that till I got back. But at that time, I thought I didn't know what, but I just had to. And so at that point, I figured, okay, I got to put my attention on that, but I got to get FBOs in the orgs, and I'll figure out ways of getting around this somehow, which I did later. But in terms of putting the FBOs in, how am I going to do that? So that's when that's when I met Captain Bill for the first time. Bill Robertson.
he was on mission in
sure,
EU.
He'd been there for a while. He set up. He put all the orgs there. That was Bill Robertson and Joan, and they became like my new parents. I mean, it was
and Ron Loving was part of that too. Ron Loving set up Italy.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
that was before. Yeah. Right,
oh, okay.
Right. You're right. Loving. He was in LA, wasn't he? When I got in first, was that Ron Loving?
Yeah, when you got in, he was in LA.
He was at USLO. Right.
Yes.
Okay. But at that time, when I met Captain Bill, he was the CO and Joan was his org officer, and so I figured I got to get his support. And when I talked to him about what I was doing and the whole thing, and we hit it off very well. And as we were talking, I find out that he's kind of upset about something, and he was upset because he figured out ways of really utilizing the policy and really booming an org and what a CO. His whole thing was on how to have a CO, how to make a CO and run an org and all this kind of thing, and that's what he'd done in Europe, but he wasn't getting support from Flag, right? Because he had written up these issues, and he'd send them up, but they'd never get approved. Because there were issues on stuff that LRH didn't put it. He would say, "This is how you do this is how you do this," and it wasn't on the FEBC, and it was just his interpretation of the best way to do it. And he had these things all stuck up on the wall, mimeoed on the wall behind him, and it was like, I mean, I'm listening, and I just listened to him, and he's just going on and on about this. And the thing is, and I didn't realize a lot at Flag and the management, they looked at Bill as kind of a nut, because he in a way he was, all right, because the whole SO Incident 2 stuff, that he lived there, that's where Bill lived. I mean, I never saw him the whole time I knew him on Flag in Europe and the US. I never saw him without a uniform. Never. He must have slept in that damn thing until after he left the Sea Org. Until after he left. And that was the first time I ever saw him without a uniform. So this guy was like Mr. Sea Org. That's all he did. It's where he lived. And he did some weird things. But what it drove me crazy was that these were things that if you're a Sea Org member and all these kind of things, they weren't crazy, but to other people, everybody it was. That's what, in other words, he would go really overboard where other people, like when he had run the AO, he was a very successful CO there. He boomed that place, except he made all the staff dress up like the covers on the books, with silver boots and weird helmet, all that.
We have photographs of that.
Oh my God. But who put them on the books in the first place? All that silly, LRH.
LRH did.
He's had that artist of his do that. I forget.
But it was LRH, Richard Gorman. But LRH is the one who said to put them in the white boiler suits and the silver boots and the helmets. And Captain Bill enforced, and people hated it.
Oh, but they boomed the place.
Yes, they
all
did.
I'm trying to say is he could get stuff done, and he did the same thing in Europe. Oh my God, the things that I saw him do there. He had a pretty good voice, Captain Bill, and he could sing. But he got all the staff to get all the U.S. ULO and the pub staff and he made them record these Sea Org songs at night. Kept them up, recording these songs that he wrote about the Sea Org. And they were all
these.
Yeah, you remember? Oh my God, I still remember.
Years later, when I was up at the Gold Days.
That is the place to be, Sea Org. That's where we all go free, Sea Org. Come join the Sea Org. Come join the Sea Org and go free today. We own the sea, the land, and all the stars. We have 1,000 ships on Mars. We're here to set the people free. So join the Sea Org. It's for you and me. Oh, Ron has taught us how to. I just remember these long.
Keep going.
Listen, I was going to say for the.
He's got all these guys singing this. Well, I remember because he was putting them all together. Hold on a second.
I just want to explain to our never-ends who are watching this, okay? A lot of us remember this stuff because you would do it over and over and over again, and it's still stuck in your brain. We used to do what was called Chinese school, and there's still sayings from Chinese school that we did that are still implanted in my brain, you know? So anyway, go ahead.
I never did it. He kept those guys there. But I heard it enough times when he was, recording them and stuff afterwards, to where it's like, oh my God, 1,000 ships on Mars. What are you talking about? Anyway, but so he was a little, like I said, a little overboard on stuff like that. But he was, in some ways, he was really a genius. And how I know that is because when he's telling me all this stuff and I'm listening to it that first time, he's saying I could have a CO in an hour. And I said, okay, hat me. He goes, what? You're the FBO. I want to know it. You said you could do it. Do it. Okay. So he does, right? And I start, and I'm going, eating it up. I mean, what he's telling me is really making sense. I want to see how it works. And he says he'll help me get the FBOs. So I decide the only way I'm going to do it is he's going on a recruitment tour of all the orgs, and I'm going to hitch a ride. And I can get FBOs while he's recruiting, And so I did that. We went all over Europe with him, and that's how I got most of my FBOs was from going on those tours with him. And while he's doing the recruitment thing, and that's where because he used the music to get. That's where I kept hearing it because he recorded it and would use it to recruit. And we even did this huge recruitment thing. It was called the Sea Org on Your 8 Dynamics. It was and he did it on the what was the ship there? The
Athena.
The Athena. And he was doing it on the Athena, and it was like a whole big thing about how each dynamic. It was really kind of silly, but it was like a kid's play, but it was interesting. And he'd get all these people to come on the ship and recruit. So we got all these guys, and these guys people loved him in the orgs, and the COs and everything, and he ran it. So I mean, that's where I really learned how to run an org was from him.
Right.
He knew that, and he knew how to do it. He knew it better than the old man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, LRH used to like sending Captain Bill out on missions because you send him in, he'd get things done, and then you pull him out before he went nuts because he could never maintain something. He could go in and get it going, but maintain, no.
Yeah, I know. But he had, to be honest, in Europe, they removed him before that. And the reason they removed him was because they were turning it into a FOLO. And his thing was a FOLO is a CLO with its brains blown out. That was his comment. And so he fought him, and then they removed him. And because he ended up back anyway. But while I was there, I learned a lot from the guy. And I really liked the guy. And he'd always drive his motorcycle around. I'd always be on the back of his motorcycle going from the ship. And little guy, all the people there, they'd be riding around in their little Vespas or what were those things called? The bicycles or the
mopeds?
Yeah, like a moped. They were all. That's what they were there. And he just moved past, get out of the way, and they go up on the. He'd be riding his Beamer, because he only BMWs. That was Bill.
BMW motorcycle. Janice,
Oh,
I was going to say the thing that you mentioned about LRH would only send him in for a short time. I guess that's why Miscavige, at the end of his career in the Sea Org, he had Captain Bill and Norman Starkey were in his missionary units when DM was the action chief for CMO Int. And he could send Captain Bill one place and Norman Starkey the other one, and then bring them back because they were only in there for a short time and then come back. You know,
right.
they were missionaries. Yeah.
When he was the commanding officer of AOLA, he built that place and boomed it, but he couldn't hold it because, and Joan, actually, his wife, telex LRH and saying, Bill needs some cleanup. He's seen Martians or Marcabians and Sykes behind every lamppost. When we talk to Neil Safadi, he's going to tell us some stories on that because Neil was one of those people following Captain Bill's instructions.
Yeah. Well, okay. So he was a little overboard on some of that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll tell you some things. I mean, I knew Captain Bill in some way. I'll tell you some stories about Captain Bill after the Sea Org.
Yeah.
And before he was ever in the Sea Org. Because I'll tell you something you don't know. You know who got Bill into Scientology?
No, I don't.
John Galusha.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we can address that in our next. We'll
talk that when we get to that point. But anyway, so Captain Bill at this point, I was able to put all the FBOs in the networks because and there was and he also. I helped, I did stuff with him and I, made sure he didn't get cut on things they needed to do for expansion. And he, it's like we worked very well together. And he even, when I at first there, I needed somebody to work in the office with me. I needed somebody tough. And I looked around ULO and, of course, it's always hard to get any of their staff, anybody that they give you a staff member. But he had this woman there was a woman working in the galley by the name of Evelyn Webster Parsons.
Yeah, I remember her.
You remember? She's a little old lady. She must have been about 4 feet tall. She's a little old white-haired lady, but she was the toughest woman you ever wanted to meet. And I find out from her, and nobody knew this. She had worked for MI6 during World War II.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, nobody asked her, but she wouldn't say anything. There was stuff she was telling me. She says, I don't care if they order me to do it, throw me out. I'll never tell. She was like,
wow.
they would have never got secrets about that. Nobody would have. She told me a few things because I could talk to her about it. But I asked him if I could have her, and she's on the galley, so what? And I made her the org officer of the finance unit. And I sent her Munich was one of the biggest org, Munich at that time. And I wanted to get an FBO in there. And I'd gone to Munich to try to see. And I ended up with a GO there. And, I knew they weren't going to give, I was only going to get somebody that they could control. Right. So I sent Evelyn out on mission there. She was so tough. And we had an FBO there. We got the money on them. But so we built a nice finance office, got all that stuff done. And I learned a lot about orgs. And I got, it was really true. And then like I said, in December, I met Rebecca and we got married there in Copenhagen. And anyway, it was very nice. And the only problems like I said, was with the geo finance, of course, but I managed to circumvent a lot of that. And every time I would do that and pull one over on whatever her name lies, next thing I know, Herbie Parkhouse is in Copenhagen to see me. And Herbie was a kind of guy that he was real sweet, and then he'd tear you to shreds. In other words, on the surface, he'd be so nice and so sweet, and underneath, man, he was a barracuda. And that's just the way the guy was. And so he would come to Copenhagen, and he'd always take me to dinner and a movie, which I couldn't afford, So he'd take me, we'd go to a real nice restaurant, and he'd take me and then it was always something after that that he would nail me with. You know what I mean? That was that kind of a thing. But we had this kind of a games thing going, Herbie and I, throughout the whole time I was there, just trying to get money to Flag. And he kept coming out because I would pull one over on that girl. And finally, he got me removed, right? He couldn't just have me removed that way. But it was arranged to where it was 8 months. I was on a garrison mission by myself, and somehow he got up lines, communicated that I needed rest and relaxation. And I was too long on it, that kind of a thing. So yeah, it was done really. He was good at doing stuff like that.
So was this the end of your time in Europe?
Yeah. So I ended up back on the ship, and I ended up in the DPF to destimulate.
The Deck Project Force is the DPF, and that was like the Estates Project Force, where new people go, or if you get busted, you go there for a cleanup. This was before the RPF, right?
Yeah.
Before the Rehabilitation Project Force.
Yeah, this was more like just go to stimulate and calm down, and then that kind of, but it was I was fine, So I'm on the DPF, and I'm figuring, the heck with all this. And one of the class 12s was on the RPF with me. I mean on the DPF also. And so I talked with him. I can't remember who it was. One of those 12 guys. And he said, I can get you on the tech training, and we'll get you trained as a 12. Like, that's what I want to do. I'm done with all this stuff. And done battling with all these crazy things that it's set up to, And at this point, and when I got back to the ship, LRH was not there. He was already gone. And we were out of Morocco, which we got thrown out of Morocco while I was in Copenhagen. And now we had been going to Portugal, but now we were going to Portugal and Spain. We hadn't been going to Spain until I got back. So now the two places we were going were Spain and Portugal. And so I'm on that DPF, and the next thing I know, Mary Sue, and she's in charge of everything now. She's like, LRH is gone. She's running everything. And she ordered me back on the FBO post. She said, you're the only one that ever did it, so I want you back on that post. Poor Larry was thrown off. I don't remember what happened to him. And I went back on that same post under her. And anyway, so I was back doing the FBO post again. And that's when I remember Jill Carlstrom being there.
Right, exactly.
It was that second time I'd been there. Because that time, that little story I told about where Mary Sue bawled her out for yelling at Diana. That's when that happened. I was in Mary Sue's office.
So we're going to have Mike back for some additional episodes, because we've gotten back to this Flagship Apollo, and he's got a lot more to tell. So we want to thank Mike for being here, and we want to ask everybody to please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button and the notification button so you know when we have our new videos that come out. Questions, comments. We got a lot on his first video, but if you got any more questions or comments, please go down below, write them. We read them. Mike read them, and we will answer any questions as well. If you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link in the description which tells you how to do that. Anyway, Mike, we want to thank you for being here. Janice, have you got anything else to say? Mike, you got anything else?
Slam that like button. Mike's been a great interviewee.
Oh yeah.
Thank you guys. You guys are great. It's easy because it's just talking to two old friends.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's what we try to make it very relaxed and comfortable.
You did it. You've done that.
Good.
Okay. All right. Well, until the next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.